My name is Mario, 58 years old, and I have sacrificed everything for my daughter Sophia. I worked overtime for years in construction to give her the best education and opportunities possible. Her wedding day was supposed to be the proudest moment of my life, especially after helping pay for it, despite my financial struggles. Then, in front of everyone, her groom Jackson poured waste on me. What happened 5 minutes later changed everything. Before I continue this story, I would love to know where you are watching from. If this resonates with you so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life stories. Now let me take you back to where it all began. I became a widower when Sophia was just 8 years old. My wife Linda lost her battle with cancer after 18 months of fighting. The day I had to tell my daughter that her mother was gone was the hardest day of my life. But I made a promise then and there that I would do everything in my power to give Sophia the life her mother would have wanted for her. Being a single father working construction was not easy. The hours were long, the work was physically demanding, and the pay was decent, but not enough to provide the kind of opportunities I wanted for Sophia. So I took on a second job as a security guard working nights. My typical day involved waking up at 5 in the morning, dropping Sophia off at school, or the babysitter working construction until 4 in the afternoon, grabbing a quick meal, then heading to my security job from 6 in the evening until 2 in the morning. Sleep became a luxury. There were days I would function on just 3 hours of rest. My body ached constantly from the physical labor, but whenever I felt like giving up, I would look at Sophia and find the strength to keep going. She was such a bright child, curious and eager to learn. Her teachers always told me she had exceptional potential. The sacrifices were numerous and constant. I skipped meals when money was tight to make sure Sophia always had proper nutrition. I worked through a broken wrist once because taking time off meant we could not pay the rent. My social life became non-existent, as every free moment was dedicated either to working or being there for my daughter. Through elementary and middle school, Sophia and I had a beautiful relationship. She would wait up for me some nights, even though I told her not to, just so she could tell me about her day. She would leave little notes in my lunchbox with drawings and messages saying, "I love you, Dad," or "You are my hero." Those notes kept me going through the toughest days. Things began to change when Sophia entered high school. She was accepted into an elite private school thanks to a partial scholarship and my savings. I was so proud of her watching her flourish academically and socially. But with this new environment came new influences and perspectives. The first time I noticed a change was when she invited some friends over to our modest 2-bedroom apartment. I had cleaned the place thoroughly, bought snacks I could not really afford, and was excited to meet the people who were becoming important in my daughter's life. But when they arrived, I saw something in Sophia's eyes I had never seen before: embarrassment. She introduced me quickly, barely making eye contact, and hurried her friends to her room. Later, I overheard one of them asking about what I did for a living. Sophia's response was vague, saying only that I worked in real estate development, instead of simply saying I was a construction worker. As the years passed, the gap between us widened. Sophia's accent changed, adopting the polished tones of her wealthy classmates. Her mannerisms shifted too, becoming more refined, more deliberate. She began to correct my grammar and the way I held my fork at dinner. Each correction felt like a tiny rejection of who I was, of our shared history. When Sophia was accepted to an Ivy League university, I worked extra shifts for months to help with the expenses not covered by her scholarship. The day I drove her to campus, I could barely contain my pride, even as I worried about how I would afford the next semester. I remember helping her move into her dorm room, my calloused hands carrying her designer luggage that she had insisted on buying with the money I had given her for essentials. Her roommate's parents were both doctors, and I noticed how Sophia's body language changed when she introduced me. She mentioned my name but not my relation to her, and quickly steered the conversation away from any questions about our family. It was during her junior year at college that she met Jackson Turner. She called me uncharacteristically excited to tell me about this amazing guy she had met, whose family owned a chain of luxury hotels. From the beginning, something about the way she described him set off warning bells in my mind. It was not just that he was wealthy, it was how she emphasized this fact, as if his worth as a person was inextricably tied to his family's bank account. The first time I met Jackson was during a parents' weekend at the university. He was tall, conventionally handsome, with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no. His handshake was firm but brief, his smile never quite reaching his eyes when he looked at me. He called me sir, but somehow made the respectful term sound condescending. "So you build things," he said when Sophia reluctantly explained my profession. "That must be gratifying, working with your hands and all that." The way he said it made it clear that he could not imagine anything less intellectually stimulating than physical labor. Sophia laughed nervously and quickly changed the subject to a lecture they had attended together. Throughout the weekend, I noticed how Sophia constantly looked to Jackson for approval. She echoed his opinions, laughed at his jokes, and seemed to vibrate with tension whenever I spoke, as if terrified I would say something that would embarrass her in front of him. When I tried to have a private word with her before leaving, asking if she was truly happy, she brushed me off. "Jackson is from a different world, Dad," she said. "A better world. He is introducing me to people who can help my career. You would not understand." That phrase, "you would not understand," became increasingly common in our conversations. It was a dismissal, a door closed in my face, a reminder that she now inhabited a sphere I could never access. Over the next year, my interactions with my daughter became increasingly strained. Phone calls grew shorter and less frequent. Visits home during breaks were rushed affairs, often interrupted by Jackson's calls or texts. When I did manage to have a conversation with her, it invariably turned to Jackson and his family's connections, their vacation homes, their influential friends. I tried to be supportive, to show interest in her new life, but I could not shake the feeling that with every passing day I was losing the daughter I had raised. The warm, empathetic girl who had once left love notes in my lunchbox was disappearing, replaced by someone who seemed to view me as an inconvenient reminder of her humble beginnings. My concerns about Jackson grew stronger with each encounter. Behind his polished veneer, I glimpsed moments of cold calculation, particularly in how he treated service workers or anyone he deemed beneath him. I saw how he subtly controlled Sophia, using backhanded compliments and mild criticism disguised as concern to shape her behavior. But whenever I tried to voice my worries, Sophia immediately took his side. "You are just not used to confident, successful people," she would say. "Jackson knows how the real world works." I wondered when my world, the one built on hard work and sacrifice, had become less real than the privileged bubble Jackson inhabited. But I kept these thoughts to myself, afraid that pushing too hard would only drive her further away. The engagement announcement came via a text message, not even a phone call. "Jackson proposed last night. I said yes. We are having a celebration at his parents' estate this weekend. Formal attire required." The celebration was held at the Turner family mansion, a sprawling property with manicured gardens and a view of the ocean. Walking up the long driveway, my reliable old truck parked conspicuously among the luxury vehicles, I felt like an intruder. The security guard at the gate had eyed me suspiciously until I showed him the text invitation from Sophia. Inside the mansion was filled with people in expensive clothing, holding champagne flutes and talking in hushed, cultured tones. I had bought a new shirt and tie for the occasion, spending more than I should have but still felt painfully underdressed. I searched the crowd for my daughter's familiar face, feeling increasingly out of place. When I finally found Sophia, she was surrounded by a group of young women, all wearing outfits that probably cost more than my monthly salary. She saw me approaching, and there was a flicker of something like dismay before she composed her features into a smile. "Dad, you made it," she said, giving me a quick, perfunctory hug that barely made contact. "Let me introduce you to my bridesmaids." The introductions were swift, the young women barely acknowledging me before returning to their conversation about a recent trip to Paris. Sophia was quickly absorbed back into their circle, leaving me standing awkwardly on the periphery. It was Jackson's mother, Elaine Turner, who approached me next. She was a slender woman with expertly colored blonde hair and the kind of face that suggested multiple cosmetic procedures. "You must be Mario," she said, offering her hand limply. "Sophia's father. We have heard so little about you." Her smile was practiced, but her eyes were evaluating, taking in my slightly ill-fitting suit, my work. Roughened hands, the visible exhaustion of someone who had never had the luxury of wealth. "Thank you for hosting this lovely party," I said, trying to be polite despite her thinly veiled contempt. "Your home is beautiful." "Yes, it has been in the Turner family for 3 generations," she replied. "We are very proud of our heritage. The right connections make all the difference, do not they? Speaking of which, what line of work are you in again?" Sophia mentioned something about construction. The way she said the word made it sound like I collected garbage for a living. Before I could respond, Jackson appeared, one possessive arm around Sophia's waist. "Mother, I see you have met Sophia's dad," he said, not bothering to address me directly. "I was just telling the Andersons about our plans for a June wedding at the Cape property." This was the first I had heard about any wedding plans or location. Catching my surprised expression, Sophia had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed. "We were going to discuss it with you, Dad," she said quickly. "We just got caught up in the excitement of planning." Jackson's father joined our uncomfortable circle, a glass of scotch in his hand. Harold Turner was a bull of a man, with the aggressive confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way in every situation. "So Mario," he said, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder, "Jackson tells me you are in the construction business. Ever work on any significant projects? Any buildings I might recognize?" The question was designed to diminish to highlight the gulf between our worlds. I thought of the countless structures I had helped build over decades, the honest labor that had put food on our table and paid for Sophia's education. "I have worked on everything from family homes to office buildings," I said evenly, "including the children's wing of St. Mary's Hospital, where your company held that charity gala last year." Harold's eyebrows rose slightly, perhaps surprised that I knew about his company's public relations efforts. Before he could respond, Sophia interjected. "Dad has always worked very hard," she said, in a tone that suggested she was making an excuse for me. Later that evening, as the party continued around me, I found a quiet moment, with Sophia near the elaborate dessert table. "Honey, I want you to be happy," I began carefully. "But are you sure about this? About Jackson? You have only known him for a year and—" Her expression immediately hardened. "Do not start this, Dad. Jackson is perfect for me. His family has connections that can help my career in ways you cannot even imagine. But is he kind? Does he respect you? Does he make you laugh?" I persisted, thinking of her mother and the genuine partnership we had shared. Sophia sighed, glancing around, as if afraid someone might overhear us discussing something as uncouth as actual emotions. "Those are such old-fashioned concerns," she said dismissively. We have goals together, ambitions. That is more important than some romantic notion of love. Before I could respond, she delivered the blow that would set the tone for all the wedding preparations to follow. By the way, Dad, I know your financial situation is limited, but Jackson's parents expect certain standards for their only son's wedding. It will cost quite a bit. I swallowed hard, already mentally calculating what I could possibly sell or what additional work I could take on. How much do you need? I asked. Well, we were thinking if you could contribute $45,000, that would help with some of the basics. The figure hit me like a physical blow. It represented my entire life savings money I had been putting aside for years, including what was supposed to be my modest retirement fund. That is a lot, Sophia, I said carefully. That is everything I have saved. She had the decency to look uncomfortable for a moment before her expression hardened again. It is an investment in my future, Dad, in our family's connection to the Turners. Think of the opportunities this marriage will create. In that moment, I realized my daughter no longer saw me as someone to love, but as a resource to be used and then discarded. Still, she was my only child, and I had promised her mother I would always support her. I will transfer the money next week, I said quietly. Her smile was brilliant, but did not reach her eyes. You are the best dad, she said, already turning away to rejoin Jackson and his friends. After providing my life savings for the wedding, I naturally assumed I would be included in the planning process. I was wrong. The following months were a series of exclusions and humiliations, small and large. When I asked about joining them for venue visits, Sophia told me it was already handled by Jackson's mother. When I inquired about tasting menu options, suggesting a dish her mother used to make that Sophia had always loved, she dismissed it as too rustic for the sophisticated palate of their guests. I discovered they had created a wedding planning group chat that included all the bridesmaids, Jackson's family, and even some distant relatives, but not me. Most major decisions were made and announced there, leaving me to find out about wedding details through social media posts or casual mentions during our increasingly rare phone conversations. "Oh, did I not tell you we decided on a string quartet instead of a DJ?" Sophia would say. "It was all over the chat. I assumed you knew." One particularly painful moment came when I found out through a mutual friend that my role in the wedding had been minimized. There would be no traditional father of the bride speech. I was seated not at the main table but at a distant one with some of Sophia's former classmates she felt obligated to invite but did not particularly like. "It is just that Jackson's father is a professional speaker," Sophia explained when I finally worked up the courage to ask about it directly. "And you get so nervous talking in front of crowds. We thought this would be easier for everyone." I wanted to remind her of all the parent-teacher conferences I had attended alone, the graduation speech I had given at her high school award ceremony, the countless times I had spoken up for her throughout her life. But the words died in my throat when I saw the dismissive look in her eyes. With the wedding date approaching, I spent $300 I could not afford on a new suit, wanting to look my best for my only daughter's big day. When I sent her a photo seeking her approval, her response was crushing. "Oh, Dad, that is not really the aesthetic we are going for. Could you maybe rent something more appropriate? Jackson's mother can recommend a good place." Each interaction reinforced the message I was an embarrassment, a liability, someone to be managed rather than celebrated. The blue-collar background that had provided her every opportunity was now something to be hidden away like a shameful secret. During this difficult time, my longtime friend Anthony became my emotional support. Unlike many friends who had drifted away during my years of single parenting, when I had no time for socializing, Anthony had remained steadfast. "She is caught up in their world right now, Mario," he would tell me over beers in my modest kitchen. But reality has a way of asserting itself eventually. Just keep being who you are. His words were comforting, but as the wedding day approached, I could not shake the feeling that I was losing my daughter forever to a world that had no place for me. The morning of Sophia's wedding dawned bright and clear, a perfect June day. I had barely slept, my mind racing, with a mixture of emotions, pride in seeing my daughter take this significant life step, anxiety about facing the Turner family again, and a deep sadness at how our relationship had deteriorated. I arrived at the Turners' Cape Cod property 3 hours early, as Sophia had instructed, thinking I might help with last-minute preparations or simply have a moment with my daughter before the ceremony. The estate was magnificent, perched on a cliff, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean, with white tents already set up on the sprawling lawn. Staff members bustled about arranging flowers and placing final touches on elaborate table settings. When I approached the main house, a harried-looking wedding planner intercepted me, clipboard in hand. "You must be Mr. Ricci," she said, consulting her list. "Sophia's father. You are actually quite early. The father of the bride is not needed until the ceremony begins at 4. "I thought I might help with anything that needs doing," I offered. "Or just see Sophia if possible." The wedding planner's smile was polite but dismissive. "Everything is under control, and the bride is having her hair and makeup done with strict instructions not to be disturbed. Perhaps you could take a walk around the grounds until closer to the ceremony time." Feeling dismissed yet again, I wandered the property, an outsider at my own daughter's wedding. The scale of the event was staggering. Ice sculptures, champagne fountains, a 12-piece orchestra setting up near the dance floor. I mentally calculated how many hours of labor each extravagant detail represented, thinking of the blisters and back pain that had earned the money I had contributed. As guests began to arrive, I found myself increasingly uncomfortable. These were predominantly Jackson's family friends and business associates, with only a handful of Sophia's friends from college, and almost none from her childhood or our neighborhood. I recognized no one, and no one seemed interested in speaking to the obviously out-of-place older man in the rented tuxedo that fit poorly, despite the Turners' recommended tailor. An hour before the ceremony, I was finally allowed to see Sophia in her preparation room. She was a vision in her designer gown, more beautiful than I had ever seen her. For a brief moment, when our eyes met in the mirror, I saw a flash of the little girl I had raised, the one who had once looked at me like I hung the moon. "Dad," she said softly, "you came." "I would not miss it for the world, sweetie," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. "You look just like your mother." At the mention of Linda, Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Do you think she would be happy today?" The question caught me off guard with its sincerity. "She would be proud of how beautiful and accomplished you have become," I said carefully. "She always wanted the best for you." As something passed between us, then a moment of genuine connection that I had not felt in years. Sophia stood and embraced me, careful not to wrinkle her dress. "Thank you for everything, Dad," she whispered. "I know I have not always been appreciative." Hope blossomed in my chest, that perhaps on this important day the wall between us might begin to crumble. But the moment was shattered by the arrival of Elaine Turner and the bridesmaids sweeping into the room in a flutter of expensive perfume and rapid-fire conversation. "Sophia, darling, it is almost time," Elaine announced, barely acknowledging my presence. "We need to make those final adjustments to your veil." Just like that, I was forgotten again. One of the bridesmaids actually gave me a pointed look and said, "This is really just for the bridal party now." I retreated, holding on to that brief connection with my daughter like a precious gem. The ceremony itself was lavish and impersonal, filled with traditions I did not recognize, and inside jokes between Jackson's family members that left half the audience confused. When the time came for me to walk Sophia down the aisle, I felt a surge of paternal pride mixed with profound sadness. This was it, the culmination of all my years of sacrifice, and yet it felt like I was delivering my daughter into the hands of people who would never truly value her for who she was, only for who they could shape her to be. As I placed Sophia's hand in Jackson's, he barely looked at me, his focus entirely on the assembled guests and the impression he was making. When the minister asked who gives this woman, my carefully rehearsed line was drowned out by a cough from Harold Turner in the front row. Throughout the ceremony, I fought back tears, not of joy, but of loss. I watched my only child pledge herself to a man who had never shown her genuine kindness, surrounded by people who viewed me as an unfortunate necessity to be tolerated, rather than the person who had dedicated his life to raising the bride. After the ceremony, things only got worse. During the formal photographs, the photographer repeatedly positioned me at the edges of group shots, or asked if just the immediate family could take a few pictures, immediately excluding me. When I did manage to be included, Jackson's mother would subtly shift away from me, as if afraid my blue-collar background might be contagious. While guests moved to the reception area, I overheard Jackson joking with his groomsmen. "Can you believe that suit? I told Sophia we should have just bought him something appropriate, but she said he would be offended," as if he would know the difference between off-the-rack and tailored. Their laughter cut through me, but I maintained my composure, remembering all the times I had swallowed my pride for Sophia's sake. The reception began with Harold Turner giving a speech that included several thinly veiled references to finally acquiring cultured in-laws after fears their son might fall for someone from an unfortunate background. Each barbed comment drew knowing chuckles from half the guests, while others shifted uncomfortably. I maintained my dignity throughout, reminding myself that this day was about Sophia, not me. If enduring humiliation was the price of being present for my daughter's wedding, I would pay it gladly, as I had paid every other price to secure her happiness. Just before the dinner was served, my friend Anthony arrived, slipping into the seat beside me at my isolated table. His familiar presence was immediately comforting. "Sorry I am late," he whispered. "Traffic was a nightmare." "How are you holding up?" "I am fine," I lied, then amended at his knowing look. "Surviving." Anthony surveyed the opulent scene, then looked back at me with concern. "Has she spent any time with you at all today?" I shrugged, trying to hide how much it hurt that Sophia had barely acknowledged me since the ceremony. She was circulating among the guests, always with Jackson at her side, laughing and accepting congratulations from people who had played no part in her upbringing. "She is busy," I said. "It is her big day." Anthony's expression darkened. "It is her only day as far as I am concerned. The way they are treating you." I silenced him with a gentle hand on his arm. "Not today, Anthony. Let's just get through it." Little did I know the worst was yet to come. The reception was in full swing, with waiters circulating trays of food with French names I could not pronounce. I had barely touched my plate, my appetite diminished by the continuing sense of isolation. Even at my designated table, the conversation flowed around me, the other guests obviously having been seated with me out of obligation rather than choice. During a momentary lull in the festivities, I decided to give Sophia the gift I had brought, a simple gold necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. It was not extravagant by the standards of this wedding, but it was a family connection, a piece of her history that I hoped she might value. I found her near the cake table, momentarily separated from Jackson, who was at the bar ordering another drink. She smiled when she saw me approach, though I noticed her quick glance around, as if checking who might be watching us interact. "I wanted to give you something." I said, pulling the small velvet box from my pocket. It was your grandmother's. Your mother wore it on our wedding day. I thought maybe you might want a little piece of her with you today. Sophia's expression softened as she opened the box. Dad, it is beautiful. I had forgotten Mom had this. For a moment we were just father and daughter again, sharing a memory of the woman we had both loved and lost. Then Jackson appeared, drink in hand, his movements slightly unsteady, indicating he had already consumed more than was wise. What is this little gathering about? He asked, his words carrying a slight slur. His eyes fell on the necklace in Sophia's hands. What is that? It was my mother's, Sophia explained. Dad just gave it to me as a wedding gift. Jackson plucked the box from her hands, examining the necklace with obvious disdain. This is what you brought to our wedding, he asked, turning to me with contempt clear in his eyes. A used necklace. Jackson, Sophia whispered, clearly embarrassed by his behavior. It is a family heirloom. It is special. Special? Jackson laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. It is probably worth less than the appetizers we served. We had an approved gift registry for a reason. I maintained my composure, years of dealing with difficult foremen and clients having taught me the value of dignity under pressure. It is not about the monetary value, I explained calmly. It is about family connection. Something to remind Sophia of where she comes from. Jackson's face darkened. Where she comes from, you mean that tiny apartment and your blue-collar background. That is exactly what this marriage is helping her escape from. A small crowd had begun to gather, attracted by Jackson's increasingly loud voice. I saw several of his friends smirking, while others looked uncomfortable. I just wanted my daughter to have something meaningful on her wedding day, I said, keeping my voice steady. Oh, so now you are trying to make this day about you and your sentimental garbage? Jackson was fully engaged, now his face flushed with alcohol and anger. You have been trying to ruin our perfect day from the start, with your inappropriate clothes and your lack of social graces. Sophia put a hand on his arm. Jackson, please. People are watching. He shook her off. Let them watch. Your father has been an embarrassment since we met. Always out of place, never understanding the world we live in. I stood perfectly still, refusing to be provoked. I only want what is best for Sophia. That is all I have ever wanted. What is best for her? Jackson's voice rose even higher. You think living like you do is what is best for anyone, working with your hands like some medieval peasant. Sophia looked mortified, torn between defending me and maintaining her place in this new world she had chosen. Jackson, you are being unfair, she said weakly. My dad has always supported me. Supported you? Jackson scoffed. He gave us a pittance for this wedding that barely covered the flowers. My parents paid for everything else. The unfairness of this statement stung more than anything else. The $45,000 I had contributed represented every penny I had saved over decades of hard work, while to the Turners it was indeed a pittance from their vast fortune. I gave what I could, I said quietly. Everything I had. Well, it was not enough, Jackson snapped. Nothing about you has ever been enough. Not for this family. Not for the life Sophia deserves. The tension in the air was palpable now. Guests had stopped dancing and eating to watch the drama unfold. I saw Anthony pushing through the crowd, concern etched on his face, but before he could reach us, Jackson escalated the confrontation. In a deliberate motion, he accidentally spilled his red wine directly onto my rented tuxedo, creating a spreading stain across my chest. Oops, he said with mock innocence. Looks like your rental is ruined. What a shame. I did not react, simply taking out my handkerchief and dabbing at the stain, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing me upset. My lack of reaction seemed to infuriate him further. His face contorted with a mixture of drunken rage and entitlement. "You know what I am tired of pretending," he announced to the now silent reception. "Tired of acting like having Sophia's construction worker father at our wedding is anything but an embarrassment. You do not belong here, and you never will." Before anyone could intervene, Jackson grabbed a tray from a passing waiter, a tray containing the remains of several guests' meals, half-eaten food, and sauce scraped from plates. With deliberate cruelty, he upended the tray directly over my head. The food waste poured down over me, bits of leftover fish and vegetables, sauce and wine covering my hair, my face, my rented tuxedo. The sudden coldness and wetness was shocking, but not as shocking as the complete silence that fell over the entire reception. Hundreds of eyes were on me, watching for my reaction. I saw Sophia's hands fly to her mouth in horror. Jackson stood before me, a triumphant smirk on his face, clearly expecting me to lose my temper, to create a scene that would justify his treatment of me. I stood perfectly still, food dripping down my face onto my shoulders, creating a puddle at my feet. In that terrible moment of absolute silence, with food, waste dripping down my face and every eye in the reception fixed on me, time seemed to slow down. I was acutely aware of everything: the sickly sweet smell of the sauce congealing in my hair, the soft plop of food falling from my shoulders to the floor, the horrified expressions of the guests, and most painfully, the look of mortification on my daughter's face. But beneath the surface humiliation, a strange sense of clarity washed over me. I could see with perfect vision who Jackson truly was, who the Turners were, and what my beloved daughter had become in their presence. And I knew, with bone-deep certainty, what I needed to do. My thoughts drifted to a long-ago memory of my own father, a stonemason, who had taught me my first lessons about construction and about life. When I was 12, I had witnessed him being berated by a wealthy client who accused him of shoddy workmanship in front of his entire crew. The client had been wrong. The issue was with materials the client himself had insisted on using against my father's advice. I remembered asking my father later why he had not shouted back, why he had stood silently as the man hurled insults at him. "Dignity, Mario," he had said, his calloused hand on my shoulder. "True dignity cannot be taken from you, only surrendered. When someone tries to humiliate you, remember that their actions speak of their character, not yours." Standing in the wreckage of my daughter's wedding reception, those words echoed in my mind with perfect clarity. I would not surrender my dignity, not to Jackson, not to the Turners, not even for Sophia. With deliberate movements, I took out my handkerchief and slowly wiped my face clean, maintaining eye contact with Jackson the entire time. His smirk began to falter as I refused to break. Refused to shout or storm out or create the scene he so desperately wanted. Once I had cleaned my face as best I could, I calmly walked toward the center of the reception area, where the microphone stood on its stand. The crowd parted before me, some looking away in embarrassment, others watching with morbid fascination. Jackson's expression shifted from smug superiority to confusion as I picked up the microphone. The entire room seemed to hold its breath, perhaps expecting an explosion of rage or a bitter denouncement. But when I spoke, my voice was steady and clear. "For those who do not know me, my name is Mario Ricci. I am Sophia's father." I paused, looking directly at my daughter, whose face was a mask of conflicting emotions. 30 years ago, I fell in love with a beautiful, kind woman named Linda. When we learned we were expecting a child, it was the happiest day of my life. When we discovered that child was a daughter, I promised I would move heaven and earth to give her everything she needed to thrive. My voice remained calm, but I knew every word was landing with perfect clarity in the silent room. When Linda died of cancer, leaving me alone with our 8-year-old daughter, I made another promise. I promised that Sophia would never lack for opportunities, even if it meant I went without. And I kept that promise. I turned slightly, addressing the entire assembly rather than just Sophia and Jackson. I worked 2 jobs for 15 years. Construction during the day, security guard at night. I sold my prized 1967 Mustang to pay for Sophia's first semester of college when her scholarship fell short. When she wanted to study abroad in Paris, I worked through pneumonia for 3 weeks rather than miss a day's wages. When she needed a laptop for her thesis, I took out a loan rather than tell her we could not afford it. I was not saying these things to shame Sophia or to seek sympathy. I was simply stating facts, my truth, after months of having my reality diminished and dismissed. I have broken my body, sacrificed my time, my health, my relationships, and most recently, my entire life savings of $45,000 to help give my daughter this wedding. Not because I expected gratitude or recognition, but because that is what a parent does. That is what love looks like. I turned my gaze directly to Jackson, who was now shifting uncomfortably, the smell of alcohol emanating from him palpable even from several feet away. To you, Jackson, I say this, I sincerely hope that you will value my daughter more than you value status or appearances. I hope you will recognize that the woman you have married comes from love, from sacrifice, from honest work. These are not things to be ashamed of or to mock. They are the foundation of a life well lived. I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope I had prepared containing a check for an additional $15,000 money I had obtained by taking out a second mortgage on my small home. This is my final gift to you both. I had planned to give it to you privately, but perhaps it is better this way with witnesses. This represents the rest of what I can possibly give. I hope it helps you build a happy life together. I placed the envelope on the table beside the microphone, then reached into my other pocket and pulled out the real gift I had wanted to give Sophia, a restored family photo album containing pictures of her mother, her grandparents, and our life together before everything changed. And this, I said, placing it beside the envelope, is your history, Sophia. Where you come from. Who loved you first. It will be here when you want it. The silence in the room was absolute, now heavy with collective held breath. I wish you both every happiness, I concluded simply. May you treat each other with the kindness and respect every human being deserves. I stepped away from the microphone, my piece said. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then, from the back of the room, a slow clap began. It was Anthony standing tall, his face reflecting a mixture of pride and fierce loyalty. The clapping spread tentative at first, then gaining strength until it filled the entire reception area. I saw Jackson's parents exchange uncomfortable glances, clearly recognizing how their son's behavior had revealed the ugly truth beneath their polished veneer. Several guests were openly crying, and Sophia, my beautiful daughter, stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, a war of emotions playing across her features. I did not wait for her to choose sides. With a slight nod to the assembly, I walked steadily toward the exit, my head held high despite the food still clinging to my hair and clothes. Anthony fell into step beside me silently, offering his support. "Let's get you cleaned up, my friend," he said quietly as we stepped out into the evening air. "You can stay at my place tonight." As we walked away from the lavish reception from the world that had rejected me so thoroughly, I felt not defeat, but a strange, powerful sense of liberation. For the first time in decades, I was putting myself first, reclaiming my dignity, my truth, my worth. Whatever happened next, I knew I would face it, standing tall. The morning after the wedding, I woke up on Anthony's couch to the persistent buzzing of my phone. Bleary-eyed and still exhausted from the emotional ordeal of the previous day, I was surprised to find dozens of notifications flooding my screen. Text messages from numbers I did not recognize expressed support and outrage on my behalf. You showed incredible dignity. Cannot believe how they treated you. Your speech moved me to tears. Confused, I scrolled through more messages until Anthony emerged from his bedroom, coffee in hand, looking concerned. So it seems someone recorded what happened last night, he said, handing me the steaming mug. The video is going viral. What video? I asked, still trying to process the flood of messages. Anthony sat beside me, opening his laptop to show me. There it was, Jackson dumping food on me, my silent dignity, and then my heartfelt speech, all captured on someone's phone, and now spreading rapidly across social media platforms. The comments section was overwhelming in its support for me and condemnation of Jackson and the Turners. People were sharing their own stories of parental sacrifice, of class prejudice, of standing up to bullies with dignity rather than violence. It has over 100,000 views already, Anthony said, and it is still climbing. I set the phone down, unsure how to feel about this unexpected public exposure. On one hand, it was validating to see so many strangers recognize the injustice of what had happened. On the other, I had never wanted to embarrass Sophia or turn her wedding into a spectacle. Has she called? I asked quietly. Anthony shook his head. Not yet. The silence from my daughter was more painful than anything Jackson had done. I wondered if she was angry with me for speaking up, if she blamed me for ruining her reception, if she was even now being consoled by the Turners about her embarrassing father. As the day progressed, the situation took another unexpected turn. The hashtag #DignityDad was trending, and several news outlets had picked up the story. More concerning for the Turners, people were starting to identify Jackson's family business and call for boycotts of their hotel chain. On the third day after the wedding, with still no word from Sophia, I was surprised by a knock at my door. When I opened it, Harold Turner himself stood on my modest porch, looking distinctly uncomfortable in his tailored suit amidst my working-class neighborhood. "May I come in?" he asked, his usual bluster notably absent. I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him enter. He looked around my small living room with what seemed like genuine curiosity rather than the condescension I had expected. "Mr. Ricci Mario." He began, taking the seat I offered. "I have come to apologize for my son's behavior at the wedding. It was inexcusable." His words seemed rehearsed but sincere. I waited, saying nothing, allowing the silence to draw more from him. "The video of the incident has been damaging to our family reputation and business," he continued. "But beyond that, seeing my son's actions through the eyes of others has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we raised him, about the values we instilled." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a checkbook. "I would like to compensate you for the humiliation you suffered and for your ruined clothing. Name your price." I looked at the checkbook, then back at Harold's face. "I do not want your money, Mr. Turner. What I want cannot be bought." "Then what do you want?" he asked, genuinely perplexed. "Respect," I said simply. "For myself, yes, but more importantly, for your son to respect my daughter. For your family to value Sophia for who she is, not as some project to be molded into your image of what is proper or valuable." Harold shifted uncomfortably. "Jackson is struggling right now. The backlash has been intense. Several of our business partners have expressed concerns about associating with us after his behavior was so publicly displayed." I felt a twinge of sympathy despite everything. I never wanted the video to go public. I just wanted to maintain my dignity in a difficult moment. "Your speech," Harold said slowly, It made me think about my own father. He worked in a factory his whole life to put me through business school. I have not thought about that in years, about what he sacrificed. This unexpected vulnerability from a man who had seemed so one-dimensional in his privilege caught me off guard. Our children are our greatest investment, I said. Not financially, but emotionally. Everything we give them, we give freely, asking only that they find happiness and live with integrity. Harold nodded, a new respect visible in his eyes. I misjudged you, Mario. We all did. After he left, declining my offer of coffee but accepting my handshake, I felt a shift in the air, as if something fundamental had changed, not just in how the Turners saw me but in how I saw myself. The community response continued to surprise me. My neighbor, Mrs. Calabria, brought over a homemade lasagna for the man who stood up for fathers everywhere. My former foreman called to offer me a consulting position on a new project, citing my obvious integrity as something his company valued. Even more unexpectedly, Anthony convinced me to attend a support group for parents healing from family trauma. Sitting in a circle with others who understood the unique pain of feeling rejected by the children they had sacrificed everything for was both painful and profoundly healing. Our children are individuals with their own paths, the group facilitator said during one particularly moving session. We can love them unconditionally while still maintaining boundaries that protect our own dignity. This concept of boundaries was new to me. For so long I had defined myself solely as Sophia's father, measuring my worth by her happiness and success. Learning to reclaim my identity beyond that role was challenging but liberating. I began reconnecting with old friends I had lost touch with during my years of single parenting. I joined a community woodworking class, rediscovering the joy of creating with my hands, without the pressure of earning a living. I even went on a few casual dates with a kind widow I met at the local diner, something I had not done since Linda died. 3 weeks after the wedding, when I had almost given up hope of hearing from her, Sophia finally called. Dad? Her voice was small, uncertain, so different from the confident tone she had adopted in recent years. Hello, Sophia, I replied, keeping my voice neutral, despite the surge of emotion I felt. Can we talk in person? She asked. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between my home and the luxury apartment she and Jackson had moved into after returning from their honeymoon. When she walked in, I was struck by how tired she looked, the confident glow of the bride replaced by dark circles under her eyes and a certain hesitancy in her movements. Thank you for meeting me, she said, as she slid into the booth across from me. You are my daughter, I replied simply. That has not changed. She looked down at her hands, twisting her new wedding ring anxiously. Everything else has, though. Since the video went viral, Jackson has been different. His family is panicking about their business. They blame me, say I should have controlled you somehow, and the unfairness of this statement hung in the air between us. And what do you think? I asked quietly. Tears filled her eyes. I think I have been horrible to you for years. I think I got so caught up in trying to be someone else, someone the Turners would approve of, that I forgot who I really am and where I came from. She reached across the table, tentatively taking my hand. I saw the album you left. The pictures of Mom of us when I was little. I had forgotten how happy we were, even without all the things I thought were so important later. We were happy, I confirmed. Not because we had much, but because we had each other. Jackson does not understand that, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. He keeps talking about damage control and public relations, about strategies to restore his family's image. He has not once apologized for what he did to you. I squeezed her hand gently. Sophia, I need to ask you something important. Are you happy with him, truly happy? She was quiet for a long moment, tears sliding down her cheeks. I thought I was. I thought having access to his world, his connections, his lifestyle would make me happy. But now I am not sure what happiness even means anymore. It was a beginning, this small crack in the facade she had built. I did not push further, did not tell her what to do or how to feel. Instead, I simply listened as she began to question the choices that had led her to this point. Our reconciliation was slow and tentative. We met for coffee every week, rebuilding our relationship, one conversation at a time. Sometimes she would bring up memories from her childhood, seemingly trying to reconnect with the person she had been before ambition and social climbing had consumed her. I maintained my boundaries, refusing to be drawn into the drama of her increasingly strained marriage or the Turner family's business troubles. I was there to support her emotionally, to remind her of her worth beyond the social status she had sought so desperately. But I would not sacrifice my newly reclaimed dignity to rescue her from consequences of her own making. 6 months after the wedding, my life had transformed in ways I never could have imagined. 6 months after the wedding incident that had so dramatically changed my life, I found myself in a place I never expected to be, both literally and figuratively. I was sitting in a comfortable office at Westview Construction Consultants, where I had recently been promoted to senior project advisor. The consulting position my former foreman had offered had evolved into a full-time role where my decades of hands-on experience was valued and respected. My social circle had expanded beyond what I thought possible after so many years of isolation. The support group Anthony had introduced me to had become an important part of my healing journey, and through it I had met others who understood the complicated emotions of parental love and setting healthy boundaries. Perhaps most surprisingly, I had begun a tentative relationship with Eleanor, the widow I had met at the local diner. She was kind, direct, and appreciated me for exactly who I was, not who she wished I could be. Our Sunday walks in the park and Wednesday night cooking experiments had brought a gentle joy back into my life that I had forgotten was possible. As for Sophia, our weekly coffee meetings had evolved into something closer to the relationship we had once shared. The gulf between us had not completely closed, but bridges were being built across it, one honest conversation at a time. Her marriage to Jackson was showing increasingly visible signs of strain. The viral video had significantly impacted the Turner hotel chain's bookings, particularly for weddings and events. Several celebrities who had previously frequented their properties had publicly denounced them, and their reputation for exclusivity and class had been irrevocably tarnished by the evidence of Jackson's cruelty. Under this financial and public pressure, Jackson's true character had emerged more fully. The charming facade he had maintained during their courtship had crumbled, revealing the entitled, bitter man beneath. According to Sophia's carefully worded updates, he had become prone to angry outbursts when things did not go his way, blaming her family background for their current troubles. On this particular autumn afternoon, Sophia had asked to meet at my new apartment rather than our usual coffee shop. When she arrived, I noticed immediately that something was different. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully styled hair that had become her uniform in recent years. Instead, she wore simple jeans, a sweater, and her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail that reminded me painfully of how she had worn it in high school. "Your new place is nice, Dad," she said, looking around at the modest but comfortable two-bedroom apartment I had recently moved into. It was nothing luxurious, but it was in a safer neighborhood than my previous home, with a small balcony where I had started growing herbs and tomatoes. "It suits me," I replied, offering her tea from the set Eleanor had helped me pick out. "More importantly, I feel at home here." We settled in the living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, creating pools of light on the hardwood floor. For a few minutes we engaged in small talk about my new job and her recent volunteer work at a literacy program something she had started doing independent of Jackson's influence. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked me directly in the eyes, something she had often avoided in recent years. "I need your advice, Dad," she said, her voice steady, despite the vulnerability in her expression. "But not about what to do, I already know that. I need your advice on how to be brave enough to do it." I set my teacup down carefully. "You are thinking of leaving Jackson." It was not a question, and she did not treat it as one. "Yes," she said simply. "The marriage was a mistake. I see that now. I married him for all the wrong reasons, and I have been paying for that mistake every day since." "What has changed?" I asked, though I had my suspicions. "Everything and nothing." She twisted her wedding ring unconsciously. "The way he treated you at the wedding was not an anomaly. It was a glimpse of who he truly is. The difference is now I see it too." She told me about Jackson's escalating behavior, how the financial stress had revealed his inability to handle adversity, how his parents had begun pressuring them to start a family not out of desire for grandchildren, but as a public relations strategy to rehabilitate their image. "Last week he suggested that we should do a public reconciliation with you," she said, disgust evident in her voice. "Not because he feels any remorse, but because his father thinks it would help their hotel bookings. When I refused, he accused me of not being committed to our family's success." "And what do you want?" I asked the question I wished I had asked her more often throughout her life. "I want out," she said firmly. "I want to remember who I was before I let status and appearance become more important than genuine connection. I want to build a life that makes me proud when I look in the mirror, not just impressed with my own social climbing." I reached across and took her hand, noticing the strength in her grip, the determination in her eyes. "The bravery you are looking for," I said carefully, "it is already inside you, Sophia. It always has been. You are your mother's daughter as much as you are mine." She faced her illness with such courage, never once complaining about the unfairness of it all. Tears filled Sophia's eyes at the mention of the mother she had lost so young. "I am afraid," she admitted, "not just of being alone or starting over. I am afraid that I have become someone my younger self would not recognize or respect." "The beautiful thing about life," I told her, "is that as long as we are still breathing, we get to choose who we become next. Your past choices do not have to dictate your future ones." We talked for hours that afternoon, not just about her marriage, but about our relationship, about the years when we had drifted apart, about the pain we had both caused and felt. For the first time in too long, we spoke to each other with complete honesty, without pretense or performance. "I cannot tell you what to do about your marriage," I said, as the afternoon light began to fade. "That decision is yours alone. But I can promise you this: whatever you decide, whatever path you choose, I will be here. Not to fight your battles for you or to shield you from consequences, but to remind you of your own strength when you forget it." 2 weeks later, Sophia moved out of the luxury apartment she had shared with Jackson and into a small but charming studio near her new job at a nonprofit literacy organization. The divorce proceedings were messy and contentious, with the Turners fighting to protect their remaining assets and reputation. Through it all, I maintained the boundaries I had worked so hard to establish. I offered emotional support and occasional practical advice when asked, but I did not try to control the situation or rush to solve her problems. This was Sophia's journey, her growth to navigate. 1 year after the wedding that had changed everything, I received an unexpected invitation. The Community Leadership Board, a civic organization previously dominated by the town's elite families, had nominated me for membership. The letter cited my demonstrated integrity and commitment to true dignity as qualities they valued. What made the invitation particularly meaningful was learning that several board members had been guests at Sophia's wedding and had witnessed both Jackson's cruelty and my response. One of them, a retired judge, had pulled me aside at the interview to tell me that my speech that night had inspired him to reconnect with his own estranged son after years of silence. Sometimes, he said, we need to see someone else's courage to find our own. On the anniversary of the wedding, Anthony organized a small gathering at his home, a celebration not of that painful day, but of the growth that had come from it. Sophia attended, as did Eleanor, several friends from my support group, and co-workers from my new job. We grilled in the backyard, shared stories and laughter, and when Sophia raised a toast to new beginnings and hard-earned wisdom, I felt a fullness in my heart I had not experienced in years. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Sophia and I found ourselves alone on Anthony's back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "The speech, the video going viral, everything that happened after." I considered the question carefully. "I regret that it happened in such a public way," I said finally. "I regret that you had to go through the pain and humiliation of having your wedding remembered for that incident rather than for joy." I turned to look at her directly. "But I do not regret standing up for my dignity. I do not regret refusing to be diminished by someone else's cruelty, and I cannot regret the changes that came after for both of us." Sophia nodded, understanding in her eyes. "I think about that moment a lot, you know. When Jackson dumped that tray on you, and you just stood there so still and dignified while everyone watched. In that moment, I saw both of us clearly for the first time in years. I saw who he was, who I had become, and who you had always been." She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. "Thank you for not giving up on me even when I gave up on myself." "That is what unconditional love looks like," I told her. "Not endless tolerance of mistreatment, but an enduring belief in someone's capacity to find their way back to their best self." As the last light faded from the sky, I reflected on the unexpected journey of the past year. From humiliation to dignity, from loss to rediscovery, from isolation to community. Sometimes we need to stand alone, covered in waste, to discover our true worth. And sometimes that discovery changes not just our own lives, but the lives of those around us in ways we could never have anticipated. The path forward would not be without its challenges. Sophia was still finding her footing in her new independent life. The relationship between us was healing, but still tender in places. Yet for the first time in many years, I felt genuine hope not just for my daughter, but for myself. True dignity, I had learned, could never be taken from you, only surrendered. And in refusing to surrender mine, I had somehow helped my daughter reclaim her own. Have you ever had to stand up for your dignity in a difficult situation? What gave you the strength to maintain your composure when others tried to diminish you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched you or reminded you of someone in your life who has shown similar quiet strength, please like, subscribe, and share it with them. Remember that sometimes our greatest power comes not from lashing out, but from standing firm in who we are. Thank you for listening, and may you always find the courage to protect your dignity even in the most challenging moments.